I've been playing RuneScape now for almost 18 years and most of the years were very enjoyable, but now and then you get these little nuggets of opinions that just make you wonder, is this real? How did this person came to this conclusion? So today I want to go through some absolute hot takes about old school RuneScape that are guaranteed to make some of you very emotional. And the best part is, sometimes these hot takes actually have some truth behind them. Also, I'm gonna pick one comment down below to win a bond. All you have to do is type out your hot take about old school RuneScape and be subscribed to the channel. That's it. The best hot take wins a bond. I have gathered all of these hot takes from Reddit, Twitter and my own community Discord, which by the way, we have a community bingo going on as well. There is still few days to sign up if you want to be part of the 300 million GP prize pool. Links are in the description. Okay, so let's see if these hot takes are actually good or not. So let's start with a spicy one. The Grand Exchange ruined RuneScape. That's a saucy take if I've ever seen one. Okay, first of all, I agree that Grand Exchange has taken away the social aspect of RuneScape. If you remember the time before that, everyone used to trade items in the Varrock West Bank. There was a lot of back and forth on trying to get the best prices out of your items. There were sections for each item set. Like I remember I tried to merge runes, especially Chaos and Death runes, and I sat next to the staff shop for hours trying to get the best prices. If you go even further back in RuneScape 2, the Falador Park used to be a massive hotspot for buying items, and there was a lot of interactions between players to get the best deals. But that's about it. That's where the bad side of GE ends, because although meeting new people was a fun memory for players, I also remember how my hands absolutely hurt from typing over and over again. Selling Chaos runes 110 GP each. Selling Chaos runes 110 GP each. Then at one point I downloaded a thing called the Autotyper, which was this sketchy software that did the typing for you, and promptly a few days later got muted on my account for using that software. I bet a lot of players just got so tired of typing the same messages over and over again. The second thing was the scamming. If you think it's bad now, oh my god, it was terrible back in the day. Every second trade people tried to scam you out of your money, and it was super easy to do as well. The trade system wasn't really optimized in 2013. Plus there were so many different methods. Like I remember herb lore draining was a pain in the butt when OSRS came out, because every single herb was called unidentified herb and they all cost 1k each. But there was this method to figure out which herbs are which. So you think you just spent 200k GP to buy all sorts of different unidentified herbs, but in reality you just bought 200 qualms for 200k. And guess what? You got scammed and the seller had already left by the time you figured out. So what the GE essentially did was remove the wait times on really common items like potions, food, runes, because sometimes you had to wait hours to get what you wanted. And secondly, it removed scamming for items. Not to mention with the GE tax that was implemented a few years ago, it removes items from the game every single day, so they can keep their value and demand. Otherwise items like Osmoten's Fang would be currently 5 million GP each. I give this hot take a 2 out of 10. It has some merit to it, but overall the GE has been an upgrade compared to the old system. Okay, I'm gonna put two hot takes side by side now. Firstly, PvP can never be fixed. It worked when we were young because everyone sucked, but now that it has progressed to what it is, there is no fixing it. And the second hot take is, old school RuneScape will not see genuine growth unless PvP and the Wildy are given the same love that PvM is getting. Okay, where do we start? This is a spicy one. First of all, you are right in the first hot take. Back in the day, nobody knew how to PK, but nowadays people had 20 years to practice PKing, so obviously it's different. But a good example that the PvP isn't dying is the latest Deadman tournament. If you go back a few years ago and look at what was going on with Deadman back then, it was absolutely dead. Like we're talking 4 days into the tournament, there was like 50 people online. And that's also one of the reasons Jagex stopped doing it for 2 years. This time, if you look at the last 2 or 3 days of the tournament, like at this point we're talking 3 weeks into Deadman mode, which means only the actual players are left, you could still see almost 500 players log in during the breaches, which is a massive number for a PvP event. If you go to high scores, you can see over 70,000 players showed up to play Deadman in some capacity. Now obviously most players did the usual, play 2 or 3 days, swap out the gold and call it a day, and that's absolutely fine, but at least they are interacting with it in some ways. That was for the PvP can never be fixed hot take. Now for the other one, which was that PvP needs to get the same amount of updates as PvM to work out. Well, it has, at least in the last year. Jagex hired people personally responsible for only the wilderness, and it has worked out great so far. If we look at what was updated in the last year related to PvP, we got a massive overhaul for LMS 1 year ago. Jagex made huge changes to wilderness layers so it's more profitable now. They completely reworked the wilderness bosses and added in one of the most powerful spec weapons in the game. They brought back Bounty Hunter, which finally now is at a good place compared to previous versions, and this was one of the most successful Deadman tournaments we had in a long time. Plus they have even more updates already planned for the wilderness in the near future. So I would say it gets as much love as any other part of the game at the moment. Now it is true that active PvP players make up a very small minority of player base. If you look at the polls Jagex has put out where only players who actively PvP can vote, you could see that they make up probably like 5% of the entire player base. I even made a poll on my community tab asking what is your preferred playstyle, and only 6% of players said PvP. So compared to how many players actively enjoy wilderness in this day and age, I would say it's currently in a very good spot. I rate this hot take a 4 out of 10, there is some merit to it. Yes, back in the day I would say PvP was the most popular thing in Runescape, but overall it doesn't have to be this one-sided. Let me know what you think about this. I would love to know your thoughts about the wilderness and if there's any way to fix it. And while you're down there, consider subscribing to the channel if you want to see more content like this in the future. Love you. People with less than 2k total level shouldn't vote. Okay, now we're getting to the good parts. Let me try to look at this objectively. So let's take a look at one poll to try to figure out why this could or could not work. Sailing has been a hot topic for the past year. It is gonna be the next skill in old school RuneScape, and Jagex actually showcased the good data to back up who voted yes for sailing and who voted no. I think sailing is a good example for this scenario because it truly is something that every single player in old school RuneScape can take advantage of. Whether you are a noob, PvMer, PvPer, skiller, max main, Iron Man, one defense pure, it doesn't matter. Sailing is useful for everyone in some capacity. As we can see from this graph, there is a trend going on where the higher your total level is, the more likely you are to vote no on sailing. Almost 40% of players who have more than 2k total level voted no on sailing. So if only players who had more than 2k total level could vote on new updates, we would not have a new skill in old school RuneScape right now. And that goes for taming and shamanism as well. The other problem this raises is how would someone with a max cape decide what's good for mid-level content like Barrows, Soracnis, Giant Mole, Warp Tortoises, and furthermore content that is related to PvP, because the correlation between having a high total level and being an active peaker is so incredibly small, meaning it's very likely that not a single update will pass related to PKing. And finally, Jagex said a few months ago that only about 6% of active player base votes on balls. If we take away the majority of active voters we currently have that are under 2k total level and leave just the high end, that would mean around 2% of active players would decide what enters old school RuneScape and what doesn't. If this idea were to go through, we would miss out on so much content for mid-level players, we would miss out sailing, we would miss out new PvP updates and maybe even skilling updates, because 2% of active players didn't want them in the game. I do get where the hot take comes from. Essentially the idea here is that someone who has 1k total level is likely less knowledgeable than someone who has a max cape. But there is also a counterpoint against that, mainly the fact that having more total level doesn't necessarily make you better at the game, because at the end of the day everyone can AFK resource skills and get their total level up without much game knowledge. Good example right now is you can go to high scores yourself, search by total level and find hundreds of players who have max cape but barely interacted with any other part of the game like bossing, PvP, raids and so on. And secondly, like I mentioned before, if we let one group of people decide the future of old school RuneScape, it's gonna be extremely biased towards that one group, which in turn is gonna alienate the rest of the players. So it's important to have diversity because that brings in more updates for all players. And to end this segment, let me quote Maud Elena because I love this so much and I wish more people would understand this. I don't think every piece of content needs to be approached by everyone. If everything just feels the same, eventually nothing is special. It's good to have different pieces of content. And to get different pieces of content, we need everyone to vote, whether you have 1k total level or max cape. I rate this 2 out of 10. I get where you come from, but if we want old school RuneScape to survive for another 20 years, we need to make sure everyone gets to vote, not just people with max cape. I wish we had vanilla old school RuneScape. The game is not old school RuneScape, I remember, with all the updates. I just want one server that's vanilla or somewhere damn close to it. Oh boy, okay. So, we did. Back in 2013, and guess what? The game almost died out because it was so freaking boring and nobody played it. That was the initial idea, by the way, vanilla old school RuneScape. Just put RuneScape's U version of the game back and see how it does. But very soon players realized that there was just nothing to do, except kill Giant Mole, King Black Dragon and Calfight Queen and train your skills. That was pretty much the entire game and everyone left. If you look at this graphic right now, the game gradually started dying out soon after release. The average player base went from 40,000 to 10,000 in just 1 year. And if the vanilla servers kept going, we would not have RuneScape as it is right now. Then in 2015, Jagex decided enough was enough and started actively releasing new updates, and the player base went from 10k active players to 30k in 1 year. Few years later it was 50k active players, until Raids 1 was released and it jumped to 80k active players. Today if you go to the homepage and see how many players are currently online, it's almost constantly over 100k active players. And that's mainly because we keep getting more updates every single month. Another example was poll results. If we go back to 2013, around 5 to 10,000 players voted on polls. If you look at the poll results now, the highest number was almost 200,000 players who voted on the sailing poll. That's how drastic the changes have been. Now, would it work if there was only a single server dedicated to the vanilla RuneScape? Maybe, yeah, but I would assume it's just gonna go down the same exact route we've already been through once. The nostalgia hits you on week 1, but then you slowly realize that there is just nothing to do in the game and you stop playing. I give this idea a 3 out of 10 because I was also one of those people who was hung up on the vanilla nostalgia RuneScape, but that was also one of the reasons why I quit many years ago and then later came back when updates started pouring in. Next one, bring back dangerous deaths and dangerous random events. Okay, so the reason why the death rework happened in 2014 was because there was multiple famous DDoSing groups that targeted big companies like Sony, like Microsoft and also Jagex. So if you were online around that time, especially 2014 winter, you would remember how the RuneScape worlds had connection issues almost every single day. Players couldn't do any dangerous activity because you would get force logged out constantly. So Jagex had 2 options: keep it the way it is and everyone loses their items every single day, or rework the death mechanics, and they chose the latter. There was even a massive bug when the entire server was taken offline by one player because they duplicated 2,000 accounts and just overloaded the entire world. Another good example was Deadman tournaments in the past where players could take the entire servers offline. If we had the old death mechanics, everyone would just lose their items constantly and that's just not fun. Now, on the other hand, I do remember back in 2007 when the old death mechanics were still in the game, and during the God Wars dungeon release, seeing General Grader one-shot someone in free-for-all bandos and picking up all the loot was probably the funniest and one of the fondest memories from that time. So I get where you come from. I give this hot take 6 out of 10. I think it could work if Jagex had more secure servers, but that's just not the case unfortunately. Plus the money sink of me losing 500k every time I get wiped in Doha isn't that bad, all things considered. AFK methods like Duke mining don't kill the game like many players have said. So, the difference between Duke mining and shooting stars is that in Duke, you can do 6 hours of mining without interacting with the game once. Whereas with shooting stars, you still need to interact with the game in some capacity. You need to seek out new stars, and every time the star level goes down, you need to click on it again. The problem with Duke mining was that I can just go to sleep while I have something pressed on my spacebar, then wake up 6 hours later and I have 60k mining experience. Essentially making it that I have 0 interactions with the game. That's why it was remote, not that it ruined the game. Also, I think it falls under macroing abuse, because if you just add pressure to your spacebar while you're sleeping, in Jagex's eyes, that's against the rules. For me personally, I don't care which way it goes because mining as a skill is just in general very outdated and there needs to be more enjoyable ways to drain it, so I get why people get upset. But it was also very clear this was an unintentional mechanic that just came with the boss. 4 out of 10. I get why AFK mining is so important to players, but I think the real issue here is with the skill itself and how it offers almost no good training methods that players want to do. Well, that was it for me. Which ones you agree, which ones you don't agree, let me know down in the comments, and if you enjoy this content, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more. I love you all very much. Bye.